Joe here again for Buzzby Bakes. First off, thank you. Had a good amount of views last week, a couple of extra subs and some comments, which is great. So this recipe is actually in response to a comment. A Suze H would like a recipe for savoury scones. Now I don't bake scones that often, but I do love them, and I do actually have quite a nice simple recipe for cheese scones, which I'm going to give you today. We're just going to use some cheddar cheese, but with Christmas coming up you might want to go a little bit more adventurous. You could substitute that for some goat's cheese with a bit of thyme, go black olives and rosemary like we did in the breadsticks, or if you want to spice it up a bit, add some jalapeno peppers with the cheddar. That's very nice. We'll keep it simple today and you can sort of adapt this how you want. You're going to need 200 grams of flour. I'm going to split that with 100 grams of self-raising flour and 100 grams of Tipo 00 flour. That's just an extra refined, super fine flour that will just lighten the texture of the scone a little bit. But by all means, you can go 200 grams of self-raising flour and it won't be a problem. You'll need 50 grams of butter. These are quite buttery scones, so I would treat yourself to some nice butter because you are going to taste it in the final recipe. A little pinch of salt, some mustard powder, that goes really well with cheddar, some baking powder because we're using half non-self-raising flour. If you're going full self-raising, you won't need to add any baking powder. 110 grams of whole milk. Have a little bit more ready just in case you need to add a little extra. 50 grams of cheddar cheese. I've got slightly more than 50 here, so we'll put 50 in the recipe, and then you want a bit left over to sprinkle over the top to get a nice crispy top. Then you will need a pastry cutter. I like to use a small one. I mean, I think these would be great around Christmas to serve with drinks, so just a little couple of bites per scone. I like to use the print side, slightly vintage, retro, reminds me of the scones I used to have as a child. Used to really like the budget, cheap, really floury ones, but they were just my favourite thing. So in the bowl we're going to need our 200 grams of flour. So like I say, I'm going to go 100 grams of self-raising. There we go. And 100 grams of Tipo 00. There we go. 50 grams of butter. Cold butter, because we're going to work this in like you're making a crumble mixture, making breadcrumbs. There we go. 50 grams of that. A little pinch of salt. We need baking powder because I'm using the non-self-raising flour. 1 teaspoon of baking powder, like that. Sprinkle that in. And a good pinch of mustard powder. I've got a half teaspoon measure here, so I'm going to use that. Half a teaspoon of the mustard powder. Cheese. Move that out of the way. So just work the butter into the flour. I guess you could do this in a food processor, just whiz it up, but it's such a small amount. It's quite quick to do it like this. Again, if you want to make more, this will probably make something like 10 scones, maybe 12, because we don't want to make them too big. If you want to make more than that though, just double the recipe. So work that in. There we go, nice and fine. So to that we'll add our cheddar cheese, reserving a little bit back to sprinkle on top. There we go. Just incorporate it into the flour and then bring the scales back. 110, 115 grams of milk. But reserve a little bit because you might need to add a bit more. Okay. So just mix that in. Now the key with scones is don't mix too much but I've sort of always stuck to that rule, and if you don't mix it in enough and you've still got sort of cracks in your dough, you'll find when you bake them they pop open and don't hold their shape. So you need to incorporate all the ingredients together and get them into sort of a nice little dough. And once you're at that stage, then don't spend 5 minutes kneading it. You just want to bring it all together into a smooth dough basically. You could actually use a touch more milk. So that's come together. You can see it's cleaned the bowl. We're just going to work it into a round. Not going to use a rolling pin, so just get it into a disc with your hands. Move that out of the way. Little bit of flour. Bit on top. There we go. So pat that out. If you were doing these as scones to eat with a high tea or something, you'd want them as high as possible, so probably pat it down to about 1 inch, 2 centimetres, but I think as a little nibble, again we're going for something a bit more dainty, so 1/2 inch should do the trick. Something like that. There we go. Now cutting straight down, again to help with the even rise. Pushing it down in the middle a bit, because you tend to find when you flatten it out you'll always have a bit of a lump and then you're going to end up with slightly lopsided ones. So just push it down a bit further in the middle, you tend to end up with a flatter scone. There, then the excess pastry, just squeeze that back together. Again, sort of trying not to overwork it, but you do need to bring it together in a ball, otherwise, like I say, when you bake it, they're just going to crack open. There we go. So, let's do it slightly generous. A little bit of milk on top, just to help our cheese stick. So if we just pop some on. Like that. Then spread it out. There we go. And then, like I said, just a little grating of cheese on top of each one. Don't worry if you get some around it, that will all melt and you'll get a little crispy cheese skirt around the bottom. It's very nice, that's where all the flavour is. So you want to bake these for about 10 to 12 minutes in a fairly hot oven, about 200 degrees. Get a good bit of colour on them, check them after 10 minutes. If it looks like they could do with a little more, leave them for the extra 2 minutes. I'm going to put these in the oven and we'll see the results in a minute. Okay, there we go, hot from the oven. That's how you want to serve them, warm, before they sort of go too hard inside. This way they'll be nice and fluffy. So we'll get one. See, we've got that nice crispy cheese skirt at the bottom. Really nice. And if we break that open, nice and fluffy inside. The shiny bits is not where it's not baked, that's just the melted cheese. Let's give that a really nice, light, buttery, cheesy. What more could you want? Maybe a glass of wine, that would be nice. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. I'll be posting more videos in the run up to Christmas. Until then, see you later.